So welcome. Uh, so we will start with actually modeling something, and that something will be a robot head, kind of an 80s robot head. I will change up a couple things in order to make it sure that it will be much more beneficial to learn and study what we are actually doing. So first of all, there will be a couple of tutorials that will discover these topics in details. But as a first time, I try to explain and clean up things for you. So if you have issues, just stop me anytime and ask why is it happening, or if I need to explain something furthermore, just let me know. So I will create a kind of a head like this, especially the eyes and some of the shapings. Will be about handling the interface and know a couple things that worth to know right at the beginning. So what you need to know that whenever we create something, let me start with the typical teapot, and it's time to explain something that is usually a common question. So I've created the teapot by going to the create panel, activate teapot, then the left mouse click, dragging out, releasing the left mouse. And because I don't want to create a teapot anymore, I'm pressing the right click. So that's the process. I have this teapot created, and now I'm curious about the sizes. I'm curious about the parameters attached to this one. So I'm going to the modify panel, and at the modify panel, I'm reading the radius. And right now, because I've adjusted it already, it shows me the values in centimeters. But in your case, it should be something else. It should be kind of a unitless value. What you should know that when you are adjusting this radius, so I'm hovering over these two arrows and holding the left mouse button and then dragging this value. This is the spinner drag. As I'm changing the radius, it will update how the teapot is sized on the screen. But here comes kind of an issue. If I'm switching to scale, select and scale, here's the button for select and scale. The hotkeys are like Robert. So pressing R as Robert. I don't want to cycle through this, okay? And if I'm using the scale, this is what happens. Please look at the screen. And when I'm scaling up and down the teapot, the display size changes, but the radius here does not. And the funny thing, you can scale it up, and this radius is still live. It is just not true anymore. Okay, so you have to keep in mind, if your goal is to model kind of a small architectural environment, or you want to keep these values intact, do not use the scale. You can use it, but in this case, you have to remember or recognize that this radius is not true anymore. The other thing we are concerned about regarding to values is if you are working in a realistic environment, and your goal is to create something photorealistic or looking kind of close to real, you have to use real life values because the behavior of light, behavior of materials will be affected. Okay, so that's the other reason we are using units, we are using proper units. And the third reason comes from the modeling itself, because every modeling tool has kind of a base level. And if you are using meters, every modeling tool will offer you units in meters. But if you try to model just a hand or a small toy soldier, for example, meters for a toy soldier is way too big. So you will slow down. So please try to use proper units at first. Just a second. So we have this teapot, and now we know that we should work with units, and we should try to avoid scaling. The scaling is not a problem of modeling. You can model and use the scale. The problem comes if you have an object that scaled up and you are attaching it to another object that is also scale, and you try to create a relation between the two, and you try to animate them. So this is where the bomb just explodes. So if you attach animated object, at first you try to reset those and make sure they have a zero distortion in the appearance. Okay, now how to properly set up a scene. So first of all, we have a reset option in 3dsmax. You can restart Max, but usually this reset is enough to perform a kind of a clean start. So I don't want to save. Yes, I do want to create a reset. And now we are reverting back to the starting scene. And to adjust the units, we should go up to the Customize. And within the Customize menu, there is Units Setup. And your setting is about you choose the generic units. Generic units is usually referred as 1 meters. So 1 generic unit is usually 1 meter in games. But depending on the convention, you can use different one. For standard modeling, it's good if we are using metric units, and I would choose centimeters because it will be a robot head. So don't forget, this will create something like this. So for that, centimeters is okay, but hold on, because here's this big OK button, but it's absolutely not true. We are not there yet, because this one at the top is also a button, and this is where you should adjust the kind of a mathematical size, mathematical measurement of the model. Now, the trick is, if you haven't adjusted it yet, there's a chance it will start with inches. And inches can cause a problem. So if you have a display that shows centimeters, but in the background it calculates with inches, you will have to work a weird ratio between units. Okay, so you have to adjust both. Usually these are matching, and when it's done, you can press OK to system unit and then press OK to display unit scale. All right, so we have a good starting foundational screen. Units are okay. How do you know if units are fine? If you take a look at the bottom, here we have X, Y, Z coordinates right under the timeline. And these are showing the position of my cursor at the moment. So if I'm moving in the perspective, if I'm moving close to the origin, it will show kind of a 0, 6, 1.8 centimeters, and it tells me that we are in centimeters. Okay, now congratulations, first step is done, and we will jumpstart and create a box. So for this box, activate the object type, standard box. Left mouse button is held down. I'm holding the left mouse button. When I'm satisfied with the foundation, I'm releasing left mouse button. Here comes the elevation. This elevation will be the height value at the end. And if I'm satisfied again, I'm clicking and I'm complete with the box. But be careful, we are not ready yet because we are still in the box command. So box command is still active. What should I do? If you remember in the previous lessons, right click is exiting from pending operation. So right click exits from a pending operation. Okay. Yeah, holding shift. So if you want to create a box and keep it square, you can actually create here. Let me show this. So we have a box and you have a cube method. So that will create a cube for yourself. Okay, so if you have a need to create a specific type of box and model, you can switch it to cube and then it will be a cube. All right, just let me delete this. If you want to delete something, don't forget, just point, select the model and hit delete. Point, select, and hit delete. Okay, so we have this wonderful box. I don't know the sizes yet. I guessed I tried to create a proportional box, but if I'm curious, and of course I'm curious about the sizes, what should I do? First step happened, creation is done. So I'm done with the create panel. I will switch to the modify panel because right now I want to change up things. So going to the modify panel, and if everything goes well, it will tell me right at the parameters that I have these values here. And if you don't know which one is which, no problem. You can just drag, move them. And as you drag the slider, you can check, okay, this is the width actually. It's true, length is true, probably the height is too much. So I will reduce this. Okay, it's a little bit oversized for a robot head, but I'm satisfied with the proportions. I will keep it as it is now. Okay, what's next? We have the box. We have set the sizes. It is in centimeters. What else? Normally, if you're creating a character or a basic model that is somewhat symmetrical, you want to try at least keep at the center. So it makes easier to mirror things. It makes easier to recognize if there is something off symmetry. So we should place this box right at the origin. So we want to make sure that this gizmo or coordinate is actually sitting in the origin. Let me show this F3, function key 3 is showing and converting my scene to a wireframe. So if I don't know, I want to match this point to the origin. So how to do that? I have to transform the box. I'm in selection mode now, so I can't move it. But if I'm switching to move mode, W is the hotkey for move mode. So W is the hotkey for move mode. If you have a tendency to forget about hotkeys, let me suggest you to remember this. Right click is bringing up this menu, and you will be able to select move, rotate, and scale from there as well. So, and many other things will be available from here too. Okay, but W is quite a common sense. W, E, and R. W, E, and R. And Q is for selection. Okay, I will tell this all the time. Okay, and you can come in and just eyeballing and try to pull Y value. This is the Y value. Pull it closer to 0. And you can do the same with X, but it's not really effective. It's possible, but it's just too much of a time. The easiest way and the fastest way is to use these coordinates. And now hold on. If you press a right click where the spinners are, so instead of spinner drag, right click, it was 0. Reset the values to 0. Okay, it's true for every kind of a value, so it will automatically reset everything. If I'm pressing F3, function key 3, now I see that, okay, this is absolutely sitting in center, so we have this fully aligned centered model right away. Okay, so what's next? The concept here is to introduce you to a basic workflow. So we have an element, we have the proper unit, so there's a kind of a setup. Then we have a basic element. We created it. Once we created it, now we are just fine-tuning to adjust the measures and the sizes. And then we will start adding and making the changes. Now, the way we do changes may happen with modifiers. This is one way to apply a modifier. Why do we care about modifying? Modifying is kind of a flexible way of editing something, okay? It is flexible because you don't have to worry about every details. You have a couple values, and I will show the main concept of this. But first, we should have a modifier. So from the menu, this is one way to apply a modifier. Modifier and parametric deformers. And the parametric deformer I'm looking for is called taper. So taper, and actually, if I'm curious about more regarding to this, you help can also, so here are the basics. and we need modifiers, and this is an object space type modifier. An object space type modifier is, where are you? Here we go, taper. So this is what taper does. So if you get lost or when you're curious about what different modifiers can do, don't forget, you don't have to download tutorials for millions. You can just use the actual reference and help from 3dsmax. Okay, now, so what's next? Taper will be applied, so modifier, parametric, and taper. And this is what happens. Okay, so when you apply the taper, it's not true for every modifiers, but taper in particular just changes. It instantly will change up the things. Some modifiers are just remaining in a base level, but here this amount value is set to 1. Now let me drive this and narrow this down a little bit. Okay, just make sure that you see this angled surface. We want to make it a little bit conic because this surface, this angle will play a part later on. Okay, now so we have this model, we have the taper, and please make sure that you know and recognize that we have 2 levels here in the hierarchy. So if you want to adjust the taper with the parameters, you have to adjust it in the taper level. If you want to access to the box, you can select the box itself, and then the length and all the values will be available, but you cannot see both at the same time. So it's depending, it's like a ladder. So if you want to look into something, you have to select the specific level of the model to be edited. All right, so this is box 001. We can actually rename this. So instead of box 001, right at the modify panel, I will rename it to head and just as head. This is the foundations. This is the first model. This is head. And here comes the idea. My idea is to create kind of a reinforced edge around this head. So the idea is to select these edges and convert them and make them look kind of tubular, kind of a reinforced protector edges, like bump edges. So to do that, I will use a different modifier. But here comes the problem, because that modifier will remove some of the items. So let me quickly show this. So if I choose a lattice, it converts my model. It's great, but the head is disappearing. Okay, so what should I do? So I will just right click and remove this lattice. So if you applied the lattice yourself, please select, right click and delete just the modifier. Okay, this is not deleting the whole model. This is a right click delete on the modifier and removing just the modifier. And I will make a copy of this head. So one head will remain the original and the other head will be the copy. But this copy will be special. We have different types of copies. So right now, just let me maximize the viewports to make it easily a little bit more viewable. So Alt W is the hotkey for maximizing the viewports. Actually, the button is here at the bottom right side. This is the Alt W viewport toggle. And I will create a double of this by using the shift and drag method. So in details, this is the axis. I want to make a copy along this x-axis. I'm in move mode. The model is selected. I'm holding and pressing down shift. I'm holding the shift. And then I will click with my left mouse button and I will drag out the model. And when I'm releasing both the shift key and the left mouse button, I will receive a clone options dialog. So this clone options dialog will give me a chance to rename the object, create multiple copies, and create a relation between the elements. So the relation here is reference. Reference is a one-way relation. It's like parent to the child. So what the original head will do, it will be followed by the child. But if I'm changing something on the child, it will not affect the parent. Why is it good? Because I can use the lattice. So I can actually keep a connected element. So if I change the box size, the child will follow. But because here will be a lattice, it will not affect the parent model. So reference, and it will head. And I need to rename it edges, for example. So head edges. Relations reference, I'm pressing OK. And look what happened. Instead of this standard script of taper and box, these are written in bold now. These are written in bold. If I'm just opening up the sub-object, I see this is the normal letter type, and now it's bold. And there's this thick blue line on top of it. If I'm selecting the original, there is no thick blue line. There's just only a highlighted bold script. So I'm selecting this one, and from the modifier list, so I'm not walking up in modifiers and parametric deformers, because I know I want to use lattice. So modifiers, and I'm pressing L just once, and in alphabetical order, it will list modifiers with L, and lattice, like Laura, is the first one. And here we go, we have the lattice there. Okay, but we made a copy and now this model is displaced. So what to do? No big deal. If I'm just pressing the right click here at the transformation values, it will set this back to the original state. Okay, and that's it practically. All right, now what else? We should adjust the lattice a little bit. Like, do we really need these joints? Not so. We're curious mostly about the edges. So I will switch to struts only from edges and select the sides and increase the sides value, but be careful, okay? When you see sides, when you see segments, it is not a spin and drag operation. So you don't want to change from 0 to 200 in seconds because it will generate geometry. So be careful when you see sides, segments as values, change it slowly, okay? And check what's going on. Radius, I can adjust and I can use the spin and drag with the radius, okay, without a problem. All right, so now we have this protector. Edge, if I can close it if I want. So let me show, here's this end caps. So I can close these tubes. And if the segments are disturbing, because it's right now it's a little bit faceted, so it's a little bit steppy. So what I should do, I can turn on smooth as an option, so it's a nice and rounded rod that's going all around. Okay, one tiny option that we should do is right now the colors are the same. So if you want to change the color of the element, do you remember where we adjusted the name? Here was head edges, and we changed the head. So we can go in right next. There is a tiny indicator for the color. And we can even select AutoCAD ACI palette. And now we have a little bit more options. These are not material colors, okay? So forget this. These are not special type of material colors. These are just for identification. So it's just for organizing your scene to recognize, okay, the blue one is this one, the yellow is this one, so it's just for management. Okay, it's nice. So everything is set to 0, and if I'm selecting the original box at the box level, don't forget, we have to choose the right level. You can test it for yourself. head is selected, box is selected, head level, and if I'm changing the height, the other one will follow. Okay, the other one will follow. That is cool. So if you have an environment with multiple elements, and you require a system, and you want to make sure that all chairs are changing accordingly, or all the flowers are opening up, for example, at the same time, or if you want to create variations at the same time for similar objects, this is the way to do it. So you want to kind of build up a relation between those. Okay, now what's next? We should have create an eye or something like that, an eyeball. Okay, now what type of eye? So let me check the reference. And here's the toy robot. And the eye will be, we can create it in two parts. So one part is an outer rim, and then we can create a lens. So the outer rim will be a tube, and the lens will be an oil tank. I will explain, I will show this. But right now we will start with the tube. So tube is a standard primitive, so we can go here and create a tube, but hold on for a second. Before you actually creating this, let me show you the options, and let me explain the options. So one typical option is we are creating a tube, and in the perspective, the active grid is the floor grid. So whenever you create something, it will be placed on the floor. The tube is working this way, so you have one radius, then you have another radius, then the elevation, and then clicking again, and you're done. And if you don't want to create anymore, you can press the right click and you're exit from the creation method. But if you're creating the tube on the floor, you have to lift this up, move it closer to the surface, then switch to rotation mode. E is the hotkey, like element. E is the hotkey for rotation. Rotate and move. So it's a little bit tidy to do this. And if you're not familiar, or it's hard to make it perfect, I'm really close to a flush surface, but honestly, it's not a flush surface, so it's not really matching. So it's not the best option. This is one. Another option is, if you try to directly, let me Alt-W and switch back to the four views. If you go into the front and try to create the eye in the front view. So this is what happens. You can create it, thickness, and then moving the cursor. Can you see how it updates in every view? So even if I don't see the changes in the front view, I don't see them, I can still eyeball what's going on here to the left and top and other views. So I'm just making it a little bit of a protruding, and then right click because I don't want to create anymore, and I can now push it through. But the problem is this angle. This angle is still not matching. So what to do? We can, and we have an Autogrid option that automatically detects the surface and helps you to put the model on the surface. And this is really valuable if you want to place your model directly at the location. All right, because it's usually, especially if you have a corrector, it's not a floor plan. So you have to work in the 3D space. So let me go back and maximize it again. Perspective viewport is maximized. By the way, if you remember, if you press T, it will switch to the top view. If you press F, it will switch to the front, L to the left, so you never get lost. And if you want to get back perspective, just press P to set it perspective. Now your scene should look like this. So the difference is that I'm turning on and off the edged faces. It gives a little bit more information about the geometry, so I'd like to keep it on. It's really useful during the modeling or even in animation. So function key 4 in the top row, F4 is the hotkey for this. And if you get lost, you can also use 3, function key 3, because it will make your whole scene wireframe. And if you want to look inside an object, or you're searching for something, or you just simply get lost, you can turn back on shading by using function key 3. Okay, so how to use Autogrid. Here's the original eye, and I will delete this and choose again tube, but hold on for a second. Tube is selected. Here's this Autogrid option. I'm turning this on, and let me just move it a little bit to show what this actually does. So as I promised, it detects the surface. So if I'm moving the cursor, it can actually select each of the surfaces and make sure that we are creating something that is fully placed on the surface. Even if it's angled, even if it's rounded, it will select the surface and make it absolutely perpendicular to the surface. So to create it, outer ring, inside ring, that's the second step. Click it again. Now we have the height, and click it again and accepting it. And because I don't want to create any more now, right click and exit. Okay, it's looking great. Now, but I'm still not satisfied. How could that be? Now, let me explain the reason. If you have a script, if you know the cameras, and if you have an animatic, you have to create a fixed resolution. So what does it mean? If you know that you will provide a close-up shot of this robot head, you have to make sure that the geometry is detailed enough and ready to show. So if you want to create a very close shot about the eye of this tiny robot, and you see these segments, it's not so convincing, okay? So we will be busted that this is just some kind of a fake CGI thing. So if you want to make sure that everything looks nice and rounded, even for a close-up shot, we have to make a decision and adjust the segment numbers right at the beginning. Not every time, but in this case, we should take care of this. So how to adjust? The item is already created. So we have to move on to the next step. That is the modification step. And modifications are happening in the modify panel. So I'm selecting the modify panel. And don't forget, F4 is a help. So it can show you the wires. And do you want to save some memory? Of course we do. Do we actually really need these height segments? No. It makes no sense. So you don't see any effect of that. It will not make it smoother or in any ways. But if we are changing the sides, that number will smooth out things. And this is what we care about. Okay, just let me push it in the surface a little bit more. And now we have a tube, a rim, and we will create a lens inside this rim. And we will use the same Autogrid method. Okay, do you have it? All right, now how to create a lens? We have some kind of a lens type object that's built in, but it is, I don't say it's hidden, but it's not on the front desk. So by default, if you're going back to the create panel, you will see this box, sphere, teapot, But what we are looking for is not a standard primitive, it is called extended primitive. So from this drop-down list of standard primitives, we will choose extended primitives. And from the extended primitives, we are choosing oil tank. And if you haven't noticed that this 3dsmax is generous with us because it remembers our choice of selecting Autogrid. So we don't have to click it again. It will remain turned on until we turn it off. Okay, so Sometimes you have to go back and turn it off, on and off, but it is a switch type of button. So oil tank is working this way. It's just like a cylinder, so you have to hold down left mouse button and from the center, dragging it out. I'm holding left mouse button, dragging out. When I'm satisfied with the diameter, I'm releasing left mouse button. I'm still not there. If I'm moving the cursor, it will create the thickness, the height or elevation of the model. So it is the overall thickness. When I'm done with the thickness, I'm clicking again left mouse button. And I'm not there yet. There is one more step. And this more step is about the roundness of the cap. So if you pull it down, it will be a little bit flatter. If you pull it up, it will be a little bit more round. It's up to you. I will set it somewhere here and right click because I don't want to create any more oil tanks and rotate it around. Okay, so here we go. And of course, once it is created, we can still go and make the changes. For example, the radius is a bit big. I don't need that much, or maybe. Okay, it was too low. Yeah, that's it. Now it sits fairly well. Okay, so this is what I've created. Okay, just refreshing the navigation. So the navigation is happening with the middle mouse button. You can also use this cube, but navigation is middle mouse button pressed down. So the scroll wheel is pressed down, that's the pad. And simply the scroll wheel is the zoom in and out. And scroll wheel pressed down and holding Alt key is the rotation. Okay, so that's it. Alt key and rotation. And if you get lost, you can always press Z, and that will land you with the selected element in center. So if you have no selection, it will show everything. Okay, now, but what about the resolution? The oil tank, the resolution of the oil tank is fairly low compared to the rim. So honestly, your goal is to make sure that the resolution is somewhat close and unique. So if you see these edges, the thickness of this polygon is really close to the thickness or the width of the polygons on the rim. My goal here is to select the oil tank and adjust the sides and see if these are matching or not. Okay, I think it will be nice and 45, maybe lower. Yeah, actually 40 is promising. Okay, so the sides here at the oil tank is set to 40, and this one is simply just kept as it is. Okay? Okay, it's good. Now, we can move further, but it's time to think of economic decisions. So polygons are coming at a cost. So if you have way too much polygons, for example, if you're creating a single figure and your scene will have only the figure and not much of a resolution, polygons doesn't matter. But if you have a robot army and you have 1,000 robots with the same head, even if the resolution is fairly low, it could be demanding. And especially if you want to animate them in real time, now then you should take care of the resolution a lot. So one way is to delete those polygons you don't need. Okay, and this is what we will do now. So the goal here is to select the oil tank and look for a modifier that helps me to remove some of the polygons. I'm pressing function key 3 and show this to you that I have the same round back of this lens, and if my goal is to create it a solid one, so I don't want to create light through these. So it doesn't have to be a glass one, because if it's a glass, I should keep the geometry, because the glass refraction behaves and models solid geometry. But if this is just a plastic cap, I don't have to keep, there's no reason to keep the back side of the model. And the modifier is called edit poly. So from the modifier list, press E as element or edit, and it will bring you different edit options. And edit poly is the modifier we are looking for, edit poly. And once you apply edit poly, it will completely change your parameters. And this is what happens. I can actually drag the user interface to show more of these. Okay, so we have plenty of adjustments, and these adjustments are depending on the actual operation we are doing at the actual level we are choosing. Now, before we are creating the manipulation, we will select polygons and we will delete those polygons. The polygons are these, so these squares are polygons. Time to time, I will call them quads, because if these are four-sided, these are simply quad polygons, quad point polygons. But for short, in 3D, we call them polys as faces or whatever. It's kind of a similar expression. All right, now, can you see the edit poly as a name? It is highlighted in blue. That means we are on the edit poly level. That's okay. But right beside it, there's a tiny triangle. If you press that triangle, it will open up the various sub-objects. Sub-objects like ingredients, okay? Sub-object is a fancy name of ingredients. This is salt and pepper, all right? So the level we are looking for is the polygon level. Because we want to remove polygons, just let me quickly select polygons. So if you drag a window, it will select polygons. I don't want to delete these now, because this is not my selection. My selection is the back of this. But just for a quick recap, these polygons should be selected before deleting. And you want to see this red color. Yet red is the highlight color of sub-object. So if you're selecting an ingredient, it will be red. Now, how to select this accurately? You can go to the left view by pressing letter L, like Laura or Linda, L. And one way is to try to select with this window, but please go to the left view, make sure you see this. F3, function key 3 is the see-through kind of wireframe mode. And let me show how to switch between the different selection modes. So please, before you do this, follow what you see on the screen. So here it is, here's the selection method. Right now it is set to rectangular selection. I'm holding it down and still my left mouse is held down and I'm releasing over the lasso, the polygonal lasso type of selection. Actually, if I'm pressing Q multiple times, I'm just pressing Q, letter Q, it will cycle through the different selection types. Okay, and I'm stopping when I see that, hey, this is the polygonal lasso. All right, so please select the polygonal lasso. We are in the left viewport, and I'm holding the left mouse button down at first because now I'm starting my selection outside of the model. Have you used Photoshop? Okay, so you will use the same method for selecting in Photoshop. I'm holding down the left mouse button and then I'm releasing. And now I just click when I want to mark a point, and I'm creating a lasso, double click will close the lasso and complete the selection. Okay, just let me click away. Left mouse button held down, releasing. That's my first 2 points. This is outside my selection. and I'm clicking once here, try to attack from below, and then try to include these polygons in the line, selecting those, and then closing the selection by double clicking. And here we go. This is the selection I'm looking for. Let me show this in perspective. So there's nothing selected up front, but everything's selected in the back. If I'm pressing this, this is what I've selected. Don't forget, rotation is middle mouse button and Alt key. So middle mouse button and Alt key. And if you have the selection, you have nothing to worry about. Just press delete and done. So we have deleted the back part. And good news, if you want to get back your original oil tank, let me isolate the model. Alt Q is isolation, but here's this button. I can just turn off the visibility of editable poly. Or I can actually right click and delete it. All right, so it's a non-destructive way. If you want to make changes, you want to create variations. So one oil tank will be partially deleted. The other one is full. The third one is just complete backside is missing. So you can create variations just by adding this edit poly modifiers. Now let me leave isolation mode. And here we go. This is it. Now, let me show you something. Why do we care about these modifiers? So it's not just we will create a mirrored version of this eye, but let me show you a quick example. So if you ask why is it important to use these modifiers and what's the benefit of it? So one of the benefits is that, let me create a teapot quickly. So you can actually drag and drop these modifiers just like layers. So here's the original head, and here's my original taper modifier. And I can select the taper modifier in the modifier stack, hold my left mouse button, and drop it onto the teapot. And this is what happens. Now I have the teapot selected. I can go further. So let me create a box. And I can actually select the lattice and put it and place it on the box. So that's another way to do it. Actually, I can do it a different way. Just let me show this. So select the lattice, right-click on the modifier, and choose copy. Now I'm selecting this box and right-click above the box and choosing paste instance. Now, why is it interesting? Now the lattice is written in italic, and it tells me I've created a modifier that is connected to the original. So you can build up a system. Let me give you an example. I try to make it as clean as possible to really show the benefits. So you have a scene and you want to render the whole scene at night. And of course, at night you want to sleep, but in the morning you want to see your animation preview. And you want to save out some settings. And instead of keeping it a little bit of a big on the side and crank up everything, you can adjust and make fine tunes. So for example, let me delete this. Let me change it. We have options like, let me press F9. Okay, F9 is the hotkey for rendering. And you can even adjust different features like right click. And I have an option called off in viewport. So imagine that you have a very complex modifier element, and your goal is to see the simplified version in your scene, because this is where you work, this is where you animate, this is where you spend most of the time, and you want to keep the scene fast and want to rotate things fast. But when you are rendering, when you want to share your progress and create the finals, and you press the render, you want to see the effect of the modifier. All right, so you can limit the interactions and fine tune these things. This is one of the benefits of using modifiers. Just let me go and turn it back on and delete the teapot. And it is time to create a mirrored version of this eye. Let me change a few things. Probably I will scale it up now. And now how to mirror. One tactic is usually if you have elements that they're belonging together, you can select them both or all of the elements and mirror them as one unit. It will not belt them, it will not create a group, it will just happening simultaneously. So these two models are selected, and because two models are selected, can you see in the modify panel that it tells you that two objects are selected? And because it is two and two different objects, you see nothing here. You see nothing here in the modifier stack. And on the toolbar, on the top of the toolbar, there is this mirror option. Okay, this is mirror here. But before we start using this, go to the front view, please. Go to the front view, and you can press F3, or it's not a necessity, but you can convert this into shaded mode. I've just exited from the selection so that the eyes are selected. And now choose mirror. And what I can do is I can choose the instance or reference option. I will definitely choose instance because these guys will be identical. And X is the axis of this horizontal transformation. So this shows it here and here the gizmo as well. And now I'm ready to adjust the offset value. Okay. Now somewhere here. And if I'm clicking OK, because I was using instance, actually if I want to change the radius of the tube, I can do that as well. And everything will follow. All right, because it is an instance, it is highlighted, so letters are written in bold. So it's absolutely visible now, and it's clear that we have that selection. Okay, just a second. I will get back a minute. All right, now it's time to create the mouth. Okay, so for that, we will choose something else, a completely different thing. That completely different thing is a shape. So it is a geometry, but it is not a standard 3D geometry. And this shape is really flexible, so it's fairly good for many different tasks. The creation method is the same practically, so you have to go to the create panel. And right now, by default, we've been choosing this basic geometry. But for creating the mouth, we will switch to the shapes. So that's the second part, shapes. And from the shapes, we're choosing a rectangle. Autogrid is still turned on, and that's good. So Autogrid is definitely required. And what East was asking, that we will use and change the creation method here. So what we did with the box to show that it's possible to create a cube instead of a kind of a box, we will now switch creation method. Instead of edge, we will choose center, because it will be easier for us to create it from the center and drag out our shape right below the eyes. Okay, so this is the shape I'm looking for. And when I'm done, I'm releasing. And this is just a line. Okay, this is just a line. So once you have it, there is I don't know if you experienced this, but it's kind of annoying little feature, a bracket. Now this bracket is like a bounding box, and it appears around selected object. If you have an object that's rounded and it's selected, this bracket is not that disturbing. But if you have an object that's rectangular already, or a box, this bracket is a little bit annoying. So to turn this off, on and off, there's this hotkey. It's simply press J. So J, as Jake, is turning this little bracket on and off, and actually it's much readable. So now you have only the line that you created, so you have no kind of ghosting lines. It's a little bit misleading when you see that selection bracket around rectangular surfaces. Okay, line is done, but this is absolutely 2D. It is right on the surface. It will be a great part for a mouth, but right now it's just a flat line. So of course we have to go to the modify panel and turn it into a 3D model, but how? So the trick is in the rendering area. So in the rendering, you can enable it in the renderer and in the viewport as well. So when you click on this enable in viewport, it will just instantly create a kind of a halo, a kind of a tube around this rectangle. Now, you can keep it, actually you can create it rectangular. So if you wish, you can create it this way. Actually it's much more promising, so I will keep it this way instead of the radial one, and make it a little bit, pull it back. So switch to move and pull it back to the space. But one issue, I want to make it rounded because it's fully square and it's kind of boring. So if I want to make it rounded, I should look for the parameters. So not rendering, the parameters. And within the parameters, this is the last value you can adjust, practically. And this is called corner radius. So you can adjust the corner radius, increase it, and create, but be careful. If you have not turned on F function key 4, you might not see that you are creating an overlap. All right, so here's this overlap. Avoid these, okay? So, where is it? And rendering, probably the thickness is too much. Pulling this. Okay, so that's it for the mouth. And what else? Now we have a couple of steps. We created the tubes. We already know how to create a modifier. You can use a modifier from the drop-down list. You can also use a modifier from this modifiers palette. But right now, we will manipulate a little bit in depth. At the previous session, we were just creating an edit poly and we just deleted the polygons from this model. But right now, we want to refine the shape. We want to really affect the position and the number of the edges. So I will choose somewhat similar method, but this is a finite type of modification. So this one has a modifier, but right now I will not use a modifier. I will directly convert this to an editable poly. So to convert it, you can press a right click in the modifier stack. So right click and convert to editable poly, or right click and convert to editable poly here in this viewport. All right, so right click here or right click there, it doesn't matter. It's a personal choice. And once we have this, and this will be the last thing for today as an operation, and we will follow from here next time, adding a couple more things. And quickly, we will start modeling 3D organic shapes instead of these boxy models. So my goal here is to soften up this edge. So I want to create a rounded, nice edge that's running along the mouth. So for that, because it's an edge, I have to select the edge subobject level. So if you can't select the edge subobject level, what you can do, first open up this triangle and make sure you see the ingredients, you see the subobjects. Or you can choose the selection area and click here. Actually, if you press number 1, that's the first vertices, number 2 is for edges. Now just select one edge that's going around. And can you see on the right side in the selection area, we have a loop as an option. It has a hotkey, that's Alt L, but we will not use it yet. So loop. And once you have loop, we will use the right-click menu. Okay, so edge is selected, press the right-click in the viewport, and hold on for a second. Okay, hold on. If you see this quad menu, that's okay. If you don't see it, please make sure you have edges selected, press the right-click. Now, before we are progressing forward, we are looking for chamfer. Chamfer is just, it's like a cut off the edge. So chamfer is not rounded, chamfer is flat actually. But it's weird because you can adjust roundings within the chamfer in 3dsmax. So they have no fillet, they have only chamfer. And chamfer command as it is, it's not so useful. We have to choose something else that's right next to chamfer, and this is the tiniest button I've ever seen. So in the line of the chamfer, there is a window. And if you press that window, it will bring you a chamfer dialog. So it's not an interactive chamfer, it is a chamfer dialog, and this is what we are looking for. The value, this is 1 centimeter. It's good, but it's too much. So let me dial this down carefully. And to make it round, the only thing you have to do is increase the segments. And I set it to 5. And that's it. So pressing the checker, so that means okay, I'm done. And if you want to do the same thing on the inside, you can select one edge on the inside, clicking a loop, right click, and chamfer. And you don't even have to adjust it if you don't want to. Just click again, accept. Okay, there are plenty other ways to make it even simpler, but right now it's easy to keep in mind that we created the chamfer this way. All right, so that's it for today. And thank you very much. What we learned today is about how to create copy elements and why do we care about this interaction of creating references and instances. We also use the units, and units are really important when we are in production. We progressed from applying simple modifiers. We added a fairly complex modifier by using the edit poly, and we actually used editable poly too. All right, be careful. Edit poly is just a modifier. Editable poly is actually the model type. So right now here we have editable poly as a model type, but here we have short edit poly just as a modifier. Okay, so there's kind of a small difference. Good news, 90% we will be in an editable poly, and we will manipulate the edges, vertices, and many other things. So we are there to start moving and creating a basic character for us. That will be a fish. Okay, so we will create a nice and funny fish with all the fins, eyes, and other things, and we will use symmetry, so we will work on one side. Thank you very much.